Culture Night,
where each week we drink fancy wine and watch movies that are in some way culturally significant. I'm Andrew.
And I'm Sarah, and we are here for episode 16, and this is a special bonus Q&A episode. Last week we wrapped up our first season of Culture Night Pod with Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl, and we decided that was a good place to kind of wrap up season 1, and so we are back tonight with a Slept On It segment with a couple deep dives, and then going into some questions that we know are just burning from our listeners.
We probably should have sought some of these from our listeners, so
season 2 recap.
If anyone has any questions that they want us to answer, we can answer those in either a subsequent episode or the next episode or something, depending on the questions. But these are mostly questions that we're going to ask ourselves.
Mm-hmm. And also just like a recap on the season. I wrote out a whole list of questions probably like 3 or 4 weeks ago, so I don't really remember what all these questions are.
I have not seen them at all.
So, but I figure that's good. I don't really remember, even though we're not really prepared. We'll see what happens. So we will start with our podcast business. We will start with our puzzle winners. So we had our puzzle with what our final movie of our 4-episode puzzle be, and what was the inspiration from it. And the 3 movies that we had were Aaron Brockovich, Scarface, and Forrest Gump. And the correct answer, as we announced last week, was Pirates of the Caribbean. And it was from the song Jack Sparrow by The Lonely Island from SNL. And we had 2 people guess correctly. Trey Hodgins on YouTube got the song and the movie inspiration.
Hogan's, maybe?
Hogan's.
We'll see. Let us know if we got it right.
I'm very sorry if I said it incorrectly. He guessed correctly on YouTube. And then at Kaylin8, who is actually one of our friends, got the inspiration for the puzzle correctly, guessed the wrong movie, but that might have been my fault because I texted her about the Pirates of the Caribbean ride and told her that we had just watched it.
But she also, it wasn't quite wrong on what the next movie might be with guessing Jerry Maguire, because there is a reference to Jerry Maguire in that song before the end, or at the very end. So we give her half credit. Yeah. So thanks, Kaylin. So thank you for the 2 of you that participated. We appreciate the feedback. Yep. No wrong answers. Let's move on to what are we drinking this week?
We are drinking the Tobin James 2017 Private Stash. And these are usually pretty good. Will you read us the percentages on the back?
This is 48% Cab Sav, 28% Merlot, and 24% Cab Franc.
Nice. Cab Franc. It's got to be good. Mm-hmm. I'm not getting a lot.
It's weird, but I almost smell oatmeal on the nose. I think I just might have my olfactories shot from all the pollen that's been around here lately.
It's not unpleasant. It's a little spicy now that I get a good inhale. That's pretty nice. Smooth.
Yeah, not very alcohol forward. More berry than dark fruit for me. But I still get almost like some of that like oatmeal sweetness. As weird as that sounds, I don't know. Might just be all the charcuterie we just ate that's still in my mouth. But very, very pleasant, and excited to drink more of it.
Yeah, it just goes down really smooth. That's just my biggest takeaway from it. It's very pleasant. All right, so now let's go into our Slept On It for Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl.
Curse of the Black Pearl.
I'm sorry, I've got to stop and let you finish it because you're so good at it. And so, does your rating change after sleeping on it? Last week you rated it a 7.4, and I rated it a 7.3.
I don't think so. I think it's about right, yeah.
I mean, I thought it was a great movie.
Yeah.
Does it really fit our high cultural expectations like Forrest Gump? No, but is it still a great movie? Yes.
Yeah.
Does it have lots of good stuff in it? Yes.
Yeah, I can't really justify giving it any higher, but definitely an enjoyable movie, and it's always fun to go back and revisit.
For sure.
So now we'll move on to our deep dives. This one is me, but I believe you did the...
I just must have typed that wrong. So the first thing that we said we were going to look into was the pronunciation of the word Caribbean. And again, a shallow dive. I did not go super deep, but from what I could tell, the difference is British English versus American English, and that the British English is the Caribbean, and American English is Caribbean, and that I believe most of the locals say it Caribbean. It also, there was a section of this article I was reading that said it might get its name from the carob tree.
Sure.
So,
I
think neither is wrong.
I'm just thinking now that I wish that we had made note while we were watching it of how they said it, and if the pirates versus the redcoats said it differently. Yeah. Because now it's been a week, I don't remember, but
Absolutely not.
It would be interesting if they had the different pronunciations there.
Yeah. Well, if we ever go back and watch the sequels, we will pay attention.
I don't know how often they referenced it, but
I feel like it could not very much.
Yeah. It would have felt very forced if they said the full title of the movie there.
Yeah, because as you were saying that, I was like, I don't even remember them saying it at all. So, I don't know. We'll see. But it's really just dialect for the most part. And the ride is Caribbean, and the movie is Caribbean.
Yeah. But
most Americans say Caribbean.
Yeah.
All right. Do you want me to do my next one, or do you want to go?
Yeah, I thought you had an order. So.
Okay. So then I also went in and looked at the origin of the ride, The Pirates of the Caribbean, which was super interesting because this was the last ride that Walt Disney had a hand in planning and designing, and he unfortunately did not see it through to completion. He died 3 months before the ride was finished. He did get to see one of the animatronic characters, the auctioneer, in the ride, fully mocked up and
Didn't they
dressed.
remove that recently? Because they were auctioning off women. I couldn't remember if they had.
I think they reworked it. I think he might still be there. I'm not. I've listened and read a lot about Pirates of the Caribbean in the last 5-6 hours. Yeah. That I'm not exactly certain, but that was the one part that Walt did see before he died. But this was his idea, and apparently it was. I found a podcast today, the WDW radio podcast with Lou Mangello. I probably messed it up. I'm sorry. I was listening to it on double speed. I wasn't really paying attention to his name. Lots of good behind the scenes information, but Walt was just said it very offhandedly. We should have a pirates ride, like the Pirates of the Caribbean, and a walk through, that's just how this one sentence is what spawned the entire ride. It was a in passing conversation. There is a version of the ride at all 5 Disney parks: Disneyland, Disney World, Shanghai, Hong Kong, and Paris. I think the Shanghai one was the one that went in most recently, and that one I think is exclusively based on the movie. The other ones had similar but slightly different stories, but they all have since 2006 been updated with some of the characters from.
Yeah, I know they interjected Johnny Depp or Captain Jack Sparrow in there at one point towards the end, and I think he's in a couple of points throughout the ride now.
Yeah, I think he's at least twice in the Disney World one that I can think of, but we have not been anywhere else, so only time will tell on those ones. There are 630,000 gallons of water in that ride.
Oh.
And I don't know if I put that in there, but it would take 3 days to empty and refill the bayou for renovations. Yikes. For the amount of water that's in there, which I thought was super interesting.
Hope no one yaks in there or something.
Right. There are 53 audio animatronic animals and birds and 75 audio animatronic pirates and villagers in the ride. So I was listening to the behind the scenes of all the costume decorations and the creation of all those characters today, and it is fascinating. Just wild, worth a deep dive if you're interested at all. And the ride was originally envisioned as a walk-through wax museum. So instead of having the animatronic characters, they would just have been statues.
Weird.
And you'd have to kind of walk through it at your own pace. But the big problem with that is you can't control the speed that people walk through those rides. And so after the success of It's a Small World at the World's Fair, Walt Disney was like, all right, we're going to switch this up and have the boats, and that's when the audio animatronic characters started to come in there. And so that's kind of how that got switched. And it was also not originally included in the Disney World opening in 1971, and the people that went to the park were mad because they were like, where's this ride? We've heard all about it, and they didn't have it there. So within 3 years they were like, oh well, I guess we need to have this here, and they found the space for it, built it, and put it all up there together. So
crazy.
Just I mean,
I know how it feels to go to Disney World and expect to see the Pirates ride and it's closed down or not there.
Yeah, multiple times for you, at least once for me. But I mean, there was so much information. I listened to an I think almost 2-hour-long podcast on it today.
I wonder how many rides either we just have all forgotten about because they were if they'd made this as a wax museum, it would have just been shut down in 2 years and no one ever talked about it again. I wonder how many rides were phased out in the first 5 years of Disney being open, never to be talked about again. That could have been executed differently or maybe got brought back later as a better version.
I mean, it seems like from all the deep diving on Disney I've done today, it was if something's not working, they are switching it and they are figuring out how to make it so that the masses of people are appreciating it, and it's just super fascinating. And just the I think all the things that this ride also springboarded in the future for Disney of how to create a ride, even something as simple as creating more than one costume for all the audio animatronic characters. They said, oh no, don't do that, but they didn't just make one costume, and if we need one, we'll do it. But they didn't have patterns for all of them, and the lady in charge of the costumes was they didn't know how much yardage it took to make a costume, so I just doubled it all and I made double the costumes. And there was a fire the first week the ride was open, and they were well, how long can you make how long do we have to have the ride down to get these costumes back? And she was like, I already have them. And so now it is standard that they have 3 sets of costumes for every character on every ride, so in case something happens or something breaks or tears or whatever, it can be shut down for as short a time as possible. And I just feel like there's so much that this ride sprung in the Disney parks and in obviously the movies that really springboard a lot.
Yeah, the only thing I saw about the ride in my deep dives was that... You never hit record?
No.
Yeah, the only thing...
That's why we have the microphone.
Yep.
We apologize for the poor audio in the first however many minutes that was.
Yeah. The only thing I saw about the ride in my deep dives was that the ship in the ride is named the Wicked Wench, and I don't remember this from the sequels. I don't think I've seen all the sequels for Pirates. If so, I've seen them years ago. But they kind of rewrote the history of the Black Pearl to have originally been a merchant ship called the Wicked Wench that eventually was sunk and re-raised as the Black Pearl via a agreement with Davy Jones.
Interesting. So, all comes back to Davy Jones.
So it's kind of cool how they kind of rewrote that into the storyline of the movie based on the ride. I'm glad they didn't go back and or just change the name on that ship on the ride to the Black Pearl. I looked into why the movie got a PG-13 rating, and it seems to be because Disney wanted to compete with the other movies that were going to be released that summer, like the Fast and the Furious movies and others that were going to be PG-13 and drawing that teenage or older crowd. And a lot of kids also, even the younger ones, were trending more towards the pushing the line of what further away from G and closer to PG-13. So Disney decided to agree to let this be a PG-13 movie, but they didn't want it to be R-rated, knowing that all the pirate stuff could be very, very dark. So the creators were kind of how the heck do we make a PG-13 movie about pirates, all the dark history and all that?
That seems to be a theme with Disney, as they were starting to talk about the ride and researching the ride, and they're like, pirates are terrible people. How do we make this comical and kid family, but not...
Yeah,
but they're bad people. How do we spin that?
Yeah, and they knew that obviously kids were still going to see this. And one of the executives was mad because they're like, I can't take my 5-year-old to see this. It's too dark for that. But obviously they were kind of purposely pushing that, and I guess expanding Disney's brand there. But one thing I noticed in that research, or found in that research, is that the title of the movie, I guess they made this movie and they weren't really sure how successful it was going to be, but as it got closer to the end of production, Disney figured that they could make room for sequels. And so this originally was just going to be called Pirates of the Caribbean, but they added the tagline at the very end called The Curse of the Black Pearl. And the director, whose name is Gore Verbinski, was mad about the title of the tagline because it's not The Curse of the Black Pearl. It was the Aztec gold that was cursed.
I hadn't really thought about it like that.
And so he was like, this is stupid. And so he told everyone in the marketing material to make the tagline basically illegible, really kind of either cut it out or just make it low quality or cover that up, because he just absolutely hated the fact that it was called The Curse of the Black Pearl. So he thought that it didn't fit. So I found that interesting because I never thought about it.
That's very interesting. He's very right.
It's not the ship that is cursed. If anything, it's the crew that get cursed, but it's based on the Aztec gold. The last deep dive I had was the Vulcan skull. The fact that they had a tall, skinny guy and a short, fatter guy on both the Redcoats and the Pirates that kind of provided the same comic relief as the Bulk and Skull from the Power Rangers movies. And I was looking to see if that was like a common thing. And it took a lot of creative Googling.
Yeah, I was wondering how you figure that out, because you can't just search the Bulk and Skull because that's super specific.
Yeah. So the closest thing I found was a website called allthetropes.org. And they called this the those two guys trope, which adds up to me.
Honestly feels pretty fitting.
Yeah. And it's about as great of a name as you'd come up with for something like that, as specific as you can. And it's very, I can scroll. There's a lot of references they have to all these various duos throughout history, and they call out Bulk and Skull, and they call it that there's two sets in Pirates of the Caribbean, but there's apparently just tons of them. I don't think there's necessarily a specific origin of that mentioned. It just kind of becomes a lot of, or is become very common in a lot of movies. They usually provide some sort of comic relief, and their non-involvement with the main plot results in them being called those two guys, because they're not really main characters ever, but they're just kind of there.
That's a perfect name for it. I like it.
And like Bulk and Skull from Power Rangers were like one of the most persistent, those two guys, like in at least, I guess a TV show or a movie, they kind of stayed unchanged and stayed very consistent throughout the whole run of the show. So
I feel like this will be something that'll be interesting to look for in other movies, because I mean, from the quick scroll through this website, it seems like there's a lot of references to see if we have more of those two guys in other movies.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I feel like it's probably way more common than you think when you like find movies like, oh, the two bullies in the school, the two like side guys where there's like, the tall skinny guy and the shorter fatter guy, and they provide some sort of comic relief and all that. So I'm just glad that it actually has a name beyond just they remind me of Bulk and Skull from Power Rangers.
I mean, I was hoping you'd find a website that would call it the Bulk and Skull. Be amazing.
That is
ready for some Q&A?
Yeah.
All right.
I'm terrified. I think I need to have some like hot sauces or something.
I'm too tired to be that creative about all that stuff. All right. So our first question recap conversation is to share the origin story of Culture Night Pod. How did we get here? Why are we here? What is Culture Night Pod? We can tag team tell the story. But
I'll let you start with the beginning, at least, of why we started watching movies
I mean, I feel like it all goes back to the wine.
Yeah.
For me. Like when I think about it is we finished our basement last year, and we were cleaning out the basement, and I was like 4 or 5 months pregnant, and we had boxes and boxes of wine, and they were all unorganized. So we put them together and cataloged them, and we realized we had like 47 bottles of wine or something absurd. And we were like, oh man, we could drink a bottle of wine every day. And we get these shipments. We're Tobin James Wine Club members. We get more and more shipments, or 2 shipments a year. And we were like, we're going to have even more than enough to drink a bottle
I wasn't just going to drink them in front of you while you were pregnant and be like, hey, I'm going to enjoy these. And then
So we had our daughter in December. And so I was like, okay, we'll have our baby in December. And then when January comes, every Wednesday, we can have a wine Wednesday. And that'll be our time, because we're going to have 2 kids, and we'll drink our bottle of wine, and we can start working our way through the stash. Because if you've been listening or watching, we have a lot of older wines that we've not kept super great.
To rewind real quick, why we have so many and why they're all Tobin James is when we first started dating, I had gone out to California for a wedding, and while I was there, went to Tobin James Winery and joined the wine club, and your birthday was coming up. So I got the wine club in your name so that you could get a shipment of wine for your birthday, and we just never stopped it. So every 6 months, we get another 7 or 8 bottles of wine, and
for 7.5 years now, something crazy like that.
And they're obviously all very good wines that we didn't want to just like drink a lot of them on like a random occasion. And so we just kind of essentially hoarded them.
Hashtag hoarders.
Yeah. And realized as we were cleaning out our basement and straightening it up so that it could be finished, that we had way more than we really thought. And we needed to drink through them because they were otherwise going to just go bad if we just didn't drink them. So we're trying to make a point now to actually go through and enjoy all of these, and really take the time to make notes about them. Not that we're super scientific about it, but that's why almost all the wines that we've had, or if not all of the ones we've had for this podcast, have been Tobin James. So eventually we will have made our way through all of them, and we'll likely switch to drinking more diverse brands of wine, but at least for right now, we have been entirely Tobin James.
Yeah. And so we have every Wednesday of 2023, we've had a bottle of wine, starting with whatever the first January one was. And sometime last year, I don't know if I saw something on Netflix and was like, oh, I've not seen that movie. Oh, I haven't seen that movie either. Maybe I should start a list. And so I spent one day just like going through all the streaming services and writing down all the movies that I hadn't seen that I felt like I should see, or maybe I saw as a kid and I wanted to see again as an adult. So I acquired a very long list of movies. And so at some point, end of pregnancy, planning for all these wine Wednesdays, we're like, oh, we'll just start watching a movie and drink our wine. And that'll be just like a date night we have every week. Cause it's not like we're going to be going out in January with a newborn and a 3-year-old. So we started watching movies, and we were
just calling them Wine Wednesdays.
Yeah, it was just Wine Wednesday. And then it was the 5th one when you came up with a name.
Well, I can't remember if recording the video came first or the name.
It was that night was the first night that you called Culture Night.
Yeah, I decided that because I think I got the idea from the Finer Things Club from The Office.
I don't think I knew that.
Whereas I feel like we need like a better, classier name for what we're doing, because we were watching a bunch of like pop culture movies and drinking like fancy wine. I was like, I feel like we're culturing ourselves. Let's rebrand Wine Wednesday. By rebranding, I mean literally amongst just the two of us. Start calling it Culture Night to sound more official. Of like, instead of being like, oh, if, Wednesday I can't go out for a work happy hour because I've got Wine Wednesday with my wife. It's more, we have Culture Night tonight. Just sounded a lot more fancy and official. We got really excited about the name, and after.
And it was the first night that was Culture Night that you came up with questions while we were watching the movie. We were watching Say Anything.
It was towards the very end. I just jotted down a couple like generic questions about the movie that later became,
most of which you hear weekly.
Our post movie questionnaire. And I think they were all are now on the posting. I don't think we have any that come before the questionnaire, and just pulled out. Was it my phone or your phone?
It was my phone. You were like, oh, just pull out your phone. Like, I have some questions for you. So he just put me on the hot seat, and we started talking about the movie. And after 9 minutes of propping my iPhone up on my knee and being like, I cannot hold my arm out like this anymore. We have to cut this. So we stopped. But then we kept going. We went upstairs to get ready for bed, and we're still talking about the movie and still talking about the movie. And then I don't know which one of us said it, but it was kind of like, oh, this would be a funny podcast, or like a really interesting.
Of course, the next couple of days, we were like, we could actually make this into a podcast.
And I mean, literally Wednesday to Wednesday, it was 1 week between when we suggested it and when we recorded our first episode. And it has obviously evolved a lot in the last 15
I have not gone
episodes.
back and watched that original video, so I feel like we need to have like set some sort of bar of like, once we get to like 100 subscribers, we'll release that as like the bonus episode or something. Because
it's only 9 minutes, but it's very, very candid.
And I think we would have kept going if we didn't have to like literally hold a phone up, because we just were talking, and we only had like 5 or 6 questions at the time, and like that was it. We had to take notes throughout the movie like we do now. But yeah, it went very quickly from a very like conceptual thing of, hey, we should call this Culture Night, to let's record a video, to let's make a full-on podcast.
I mean, that was all in the process of like 24 hours. And then it was like, okay, we should, like, the podcast would be pretty cool. Okay, maybe we should do it. Next week we'll just set up the camera and we'll record it and we'll see how it goes. And then so we finally record The Graduate, our first episode, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, now I have a week to release this. Obviously we could have pushed longer, but we knew if we didn't just do it, we wouldn't keep going. So how do you make a podcast? How do you upload podcasts? We need like Instagram and Gmail and thumbnails and like branding. And obviously it's all very, very, very basic. I am not any kind of graphic designer. It was just I need something to get us started, and we're going to go with this for now, and we can kind of work from there. But, it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I definitely am glad that we just kind of like bit the bullet and just went right into it, because I remember the first time we were recording the podcast, I was like, I'm so tired. I don't know if we can do it tonight. It was just, didn't know if like we were, in the zone for, or in the flow for making a podcast that night. But I just remember, I think it's the Solid Verbal podcast talks about like the most important thing for a podcast is just hit record. It doesn't matter if like
which would have been nice to have reminded myself when we started this podcast.
Yeah. That right. Your first episodes aren't going to be great. You're going to learn, what works over time. You're going to get into the groove, like whatnot. The biggest thing is just keep hitting record, because if you stop, then you probably are, not likely to pick it back up, or you're not going to get better. That you just kind of need to start from somewhere and just keep hitting record.
And just going back at the graduate episode, I think is like 37 minutes, and how it was like, oh, well, maybe we should add in this, and we should probably do this, and just how much just in the last 3 months, 4 months, I don't even know anymore, how much it's just grown. And I feel like we have a really good outline, but we're obviously open to change, and we're going to switch things up a little bit now in certain ways. But
yeah, I wish we could get more feedback on are we talking too slow or too long? Would people like this to be more closer to an hour in length? Do we need to split this up into
30-minute segments?
Yeah, the for the show or recap, and then after the show and whatnot. Just how people like to consume this, and do they want to consume it in series, or have each movie be its own self-contained episode of here's our pre-roll, here's our immediate afterthoughts, and then here's our slept on it segment, and have that all just be one. So
there's so many ways this can all go that we're just kind of doing what works right now.
The weeks fly by, so the next week we just kind of sit down, hit record, and try to make any adjustments that we have thought of in the last week. But there's not generally much time to really pivot.
Yeah. So we're enjoying this shorter week without a movie. Obviously, I'll still have to edit this podcast, which will probably end up being fairly long at this point. But without having to research the movie and do all of that kind of stuff is a little bit of a relief. All right, so into our next question. How do you feel after 15 straight episodes? How are you feeling about all of it?
I can't believe it's already been 15.
Right? Well, but the number 15...
the number 15 on the screen now, unrelated, but...
The number 15 doesn't seem like that many, but then when you think about how 15 is 15 weeks and how much time that is...
15 hours of talking. Yeah, I think of some podcasts that I've listened to, and a lot of them, didn't really make it past 8 or 9 or 12 episodes, that we've already made it farther than... I think someone said the average podcast fails before the 7th episode. So we've already made it twice that long. But it still feels like we're still relatively new to it. But I do like our consistency of just each week right now, pushing out another episode. But I still feel like we are still finding exactly what works. And I imagine that'll probably just continue on forever.
That'll be the case. Yeah, I think obviously I put a lot of time into it with all the editing and the social media and all the things. So it is very time consuming for me. But I think the biggest thing that keeps me going is it's once a week I get to sit down and talk to you for 1 hour uninterrupted, and not just comments here and there about a show we're watching. We're going to sit down and we're going to drink some wine and we're just going to hang out. And this is something that we get to do together. And I think that's the biggest driving force for me, especially in this season of chaos that we're in right now.
Yeah. It's crazy because put the kids to bed, and then we enter this other world where we are on a podcast, and we're in this third story of our house, and we are watching
that didn't exist 5 months ago.
Yeah. It's crazy. Just the different world for 3 hours while we do this each week.
But it's been fun. What have you learned since we started?
I have learned just how important it is to have a routine, or not a routine, but an agenda for a podcast. And I've kind of noticed that more in the podcast that I've listened to. Is it's not as just random as you think, and there's a lot of more planning that goes into every episode that you think, and you can kind of see how, as some podcasts try new things and change things around, but the format that they have and the notes they must be taking, especially to coordinate amongst multiple people or people that aren't all in the same room, it's a lot more complicated than it seems. It's not just two people that just hit record for the most part, just hit record and just literally go off script until they run out of ideas and hit stop. A lot of times there is so much more of planning, and here's the bullet points we want to hit on, and trying to make it still feel organic, because you don't want it to feel too scripted. We don't want it to be you got to find that medium there. And I think that's the biggest thing I've learned there, is the importance of having that plan.
That's very true. I think I make the outline every week, and most of it's already in there, but I don't think I've fully appreciated it like that. But it's very true. We are very reliant on our outline for sure. I have learned it takes a lot to make a podcast, like you said. I mean, just all the things, even just the accounts you have to post to iHeartRadio and Apple Podcasts, and
just go to podcast.com, and it's a lot more than that.
It is a pretty involved process, but also just personally, I've learned a lot about editing, and I am not anywhere near an audio editor at all. But I have learned a lot about it in the last couple of weeks, and I've learned how to make the reels and the shorts, and how to edit those, not just on my phone, but like on the computer, and so many like little techniques for that kind of stuff, or just like how to freeze a frame of a video, just some simple stuff that I hadn't done in all my other video editing.
I think we'll learn this week just how much nicer these microphones are than the video mic halfway across the room sounds.
I'm so sorry. I can't believe, like, what a noob. Episode 16, you think I'd have it down by now? It's because we're not watching a movie.
We changed things around too much.
Yeah, things are a little different. I forgot. But yeah, I've learned a lot of technical stuff, and I've also, I think, relearned to appreciate movies. I think for so long it just seemed like such a mental chore to watch a movie, but I've started to take a lot more from movies, and I'm excited about them again.
I'm glad that you finally started appreciating movies, that they're not just something to have on as background noise, that there's a lot more to explore and things to track across movies, or to take note of. Not that we have super consistent notes across movies. Sometimes we're way too critical of like whether things are realistic or not realistic. Other times we're thinking of the direction or the art direction and those kind of things, but that there's a lot more to think about than just like, oh, did this movie end yet? Yeah.
I mean, if we were watching a movie every single night of the week, I don't think I could do it. And like with this critical of an eye that we watch them at now, watching them once a week, occasionally twice a week is fine.
Yeah.
But I just couldn't do it every day. My brain is too tired to be that critical.
I can watch the movies every day. I don't know if I have a podcast a day in me. That seems
for sure.
No matter who you are or what you're talking about, it seems like a lot of effort.
All right. Our next question is, what is your favorite movie that we've watched?
See, obviously I gave Forrest Gump a 10, but I don't know if I would say that's the favorite one I've watched, because I have seen that before. Do we have a list of them? I think so far out of them, I would probably say Top Gun just seemed like the most fun that I really had. But looking back, it's like, I don't really see one that really stands out, from the crowd of being like that much more like that was, the best one. I'm trying to think of which one I thought. Like I remember one time around like 6 or 7, I feel like we like really did like a really good episode, and it was like, felt like it was good pace throughout the talking points, and that we actually had like good dialogue throughout it. But
was it Young Frankenstein?
Might have been.
Yeah, but I also feel like we were so tired during that one.
Yeah, it might have been Indiana Jones or something.
I wish we had podcast episodes for Sleepless in Seattle, When Harry Met Sally, and Say Anything. Say Anything is the one that kind of sparked this, that we have the video recording of. Yeah. But I feel like those were ones that I really wish that we had watched for the podcast.
If I could cheat and add those that we watched before the podcast, I would say When Harry Met Sally, because I had not seen that before. It was not what I expected, and was a very good movie.
So you're saying that your favorite movie, though, of the ones we've watched for the podcast so far has been Top Gun?
Yeah.
That's also my favorite, too. I think I just wasn't expecting to like it so much. Forrest Gump was also great. I also really enjoyed Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And Breakfast Club, just even though I've seen it before. It's just a good movie. But I think Top Gun was my favorite. Just like the action, but it was also like had the little bit of humor. I think it had a lot of everything.
Yeah, and I'd seen it before, but I feel like I've seen Breakfast Club and Forrest Gump and Ferris Bueller so many more times that I feel like I enjoyed Top Gun more than I thought I would.
So did any movie surprise you in any way, good, bad?
Show me the list again.
I will be cutting out all this dead air while we're thinking, but that's good. You got to process it all.
I'm going to say Risky Business surprised me in that I had just completely forgotten the whole prostitution aspect of the whole premise there. Second one being Never Been Kissed. I was most surprised that they never played Kiss Me by Sixpence None the Richer anywhere in the movie. Episode of the century.
I would say The Graduate probably surprised me the most. I mean, I heard about that movie for years and years and years, and there was so much to that I was not prepared for.
Yeah.
Risky Business was also surprising. I mean, Blazing Saddles was surprising for me too, but I
never heard of it.
I had no context, so obviously it was going to be surprising. But also, I will say, Young Frankenstein surprised me in how much I liked that one. I feel like I can't even say it right anymore because I think I overthink it too much. But Young Frankenstein.
I mean, if you had said Young Frankenstein up front, I would have been like, wow, so pretentious. So you can't win.
I'm also pretty certain in the episode I said it Frankenstein at one point without just totally off the cuff. And I was like, oh, going back and editing it. I was like, I did not mean to say it like that. But yeah, I think my biggest surprise was The Graduate and The Risky Business for what the stories were. And then I was surprised by how much I enjoyed Young Frankenstein. All right. Next question. Is there any movie you wish we hadn't watched in the first season?
Probably Never Been Kissed. I feel like it didn't really fit with the flow of the older classics that we'd mostly been watching. It fit in that we were watching a really silly 90s rom-com on Valentine's Day. I don't know if it was the actual day itself, but it was
I think
like
it was the day after Valentine's Day.
That it was felt with the times, although we released it like a week after that, so it didn't really feel as with the times when we actually released it. But that's probably the only one that I really kind of regret watching so far.
Yes, that for all those reasons. But I think a little bit regret watching The Jerk. Not that it was a bad movie. Mm-hmm. I just think there would have been a different time and a different place in the where we want this podcast to go, where that would have fit better.
Fit that in like a Steve Martin season.
I don't know. I like watching the movie and editing the podcast and like doing all the social media posts for it. I was like, I just feel like this might not have been a great choice.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was good to watch a couple 70s comedies in a row, but that one for me was kind of, again, not that it was a bad movie, just, This one might be kind of hard. Do you have a favorite wine?
Favorite wine? Probably the second 5 that we had. I think that one I really liked.
I think I liked the first 5 better. I asked this and I don't actually have one off the top of my head.
You need to go back and look and see what we rated them.
I think the Petite Syrah that we had was pretty good.
That's true. We did a Petite Syrah. Yeah, that's probably
I mean, they're all good. So it's hard to really pick. This one's pretty good too. But I figured I had to throw the wine question in there if we're going to talk about all the movies.
I think we need like a chart or somewhere where we have like each of them kind of ranked and be like, this wine I'm going to put above this one or below this one and figure out where these might fall.
I'll let you be in charge
as we get further on. But I feel like it's hard to look back and just remember a wine that I drank 8 weeks ago.
I agree. That's why I put it on there, and then I was like, I feel like this is a tough question. All right. What are you looking forward to for the next season of Culture Night Pod?
I'm looking forward to getting some more like thematic continuity between episodes where it's not like we went down this rabbit hole of getting really involved with one movie, doing a deep dive on it, and then not directly visiting it again, or only referencing it loosely a couple weeks later. I'd like to get more, and I'm glad that we added like the whole movies that were released that year and songs that were released that year to get an idea of the times. But I think seeing some like segments of like, hey, we're going to watch a bunch of movies from like this, short year, 1 or 2 year time periods, or this actor throughout different times to get some more continuity between what we're learning.
Mm-hmm. I feel like there's a lot of room there for different types of themes, like you said, just like a year or 2 years or a whole decade, or let's watch like let's take the 90s and watch a crime drama, a comedy, and a horror movie. I don't know, just like different dramas from a decade and like see how they compare. And like, I feel like there's so many different ways that we can take it that it'll just make the appreciation of movies so much greater, or actor.
Of like the themes or seasons that we've talked about, which are you like most excited about possibly visiting?
I'm excited about a musical theme. And
have to dress up for those. No, we're not.
Just because I feel like there's some that I like want to see again or revisit. I think I'm more excited too to get into some like 90s and early 2000s. It's been fun doing some of these ones where it's like, I remember this coming out and I've maybe seen it a couple times, but like, I like remember the hype around it, but I don't remember the movie itself, like kind of more of our time. But also I've just taken so much from the like earlier movies of like, oh, this is how this became this, and this is where this actor started and how they grew, that I appreciate all that stuff. But I think like a musical theme would be really fun, and then something like early 2000s.
I'm most excited to look at noir films, like the old really shy ones, and westerns, mainly because I feel like they are so cliched and made fun of at this point, but at some point they must have been new or novel or been like really popular at the time, to see what they were before they were really cliched or made fun of, and then also to see some of the early versions of the movies that made fun of them or parodied them, that I think most of the times I think of like the noir films as being just like something they show in a cartoon, or like Janet Snakehole on Parks and Rec, and seeing like those really caricature versions of that, or like Blazing Saddles showing a Western, or some cartoon showing something like that. That I want to see what the original work was to really appreciate the comedy of what has parodied them. Mm-hmm. So those two, I think I'm the most excited about.
And especially like, I don't know that I would just like sit down and watch those films if we weren't doing it for something like this, that to have more of a purpose behind watching them besides like, oh, tonight we're going to sit down and watch an old Western movie.
We're probably need some coffee for those before we watch them.
Definitely. Or we could have espresso martinis.
Or the Apothic, what's it called?
Brew,
yeah. Mm-hmm. It's got coffee in the wine. A lethal combination, or just have some Four Locos.
No, thank you.
Welcome to Culture Night, where we drink Four Locos and watch movies that are old.
No. It's gonna take you a while to recover from that one. Oh man, but now I think about it, and I'm like, I also, especially after my Disney deep dive today, doing like a Disney theme, I think of the like more obscure Disney movies would be super interesting. Also like 90s rom-coms, or like late 80s, early 90s rom-coms. I feel like that was such an era for that style of movie. And then maybe Never Been Kissed won't be such a hated movie if we watch more from that time. But I don't know, there's so many.
Yeah, I'd like to see like, what was the first Disney Channel original movie? DCOM. Like what was the first?
We have to do DCOMs because you haven't seen most of them.
But I want to see like what is the first one, and then do it like a deep dive. Like what did they, why did they do this? Did they have a bunch of planned? Is this like, was it a one-off thing that grew?
They came out every month. It was wild
to see like the backstory of that. Like where they did one, it caught on. They were like, we need to do 19 immediately.
Y'all, we're gonna be around a while. We have a lot of places that this is gonna go.
The best part about this is we're mostly doing it like for our own education and fun, that we definitely appreciate our viewers, but it's not like we are going to stop because we don't have enough viewers. That we appreciate any feedback and any subscribers, anything like that. But
yeah, I mean, like I said, the best part about this for me is that I get to sit down one night a week and watch a movie and drink wine with you and talk to you without any interruptions for a whole hour.
And we already have the gear. I would like to get some different lighting, or kind of figure out a studio a little bit better, but it's nice we basically didn't pay anything for the gear, not that we're sponsored, but because just some awards from work that I was able to redeem for Amazon and Walmart.
That's why we went in really hard really quick with the equipment. We didn't just spring a bunch of money on this podcast.
It was very much kind of like I've got all these gift cards that we have, why not go ahead and just invest them a couple $100 into the gear for this podcast, get a older Rodecaster Pro instead of the new one, because we don't need all the brand new features. We're not
super fancy.
Yeah. And it kind of came together really quickly of just the perfect timing and all that.
Yes. I'm especially future me that's editing this and here's the beginning of this versus the end. I will do what I can to clean up the beginning.
Yes, but like run through the whatever AI, clean up things, change the levels.
I'm going to do what I can, but I am definitely appreciating the nicer setup of these Rode mics. All right, next question. Is there anything that you would change or you wish you had done differently to get started?
To get started, I have no regrets. I'm just glad that like I said, that we started and we hit record.
And I think we picked a great first movie too. Like one we both hadn't seen, and that was just like something.
I remember like the first one finishing, like the Graduate finishing, and just being like, I don't smoke, but I feel like I need a cigarette after what the heck I just watched.
Exactly
it was
what you said.
Just not expected. I felt like, in the movies when they show like people who just like ridden a roller coaster, their like heads all, the hair's all blown back. Just the craziness of that ending just caught me so off guard that I felt like it was the perfect one to react to, being like, yeah, what the heck just happened?
And I mean, I'm so glad. I feel like it was a good first one, but I also wish that we had a little bit more of the structure and the setup that we have for podcasts, for the podcast now, to go back and do that one. I mean, obviously it wouldn't have the same effect as we've seen it now, but like that was a good one. Yeah, I don't know that I would really change anything either. Maybe to have had like an extra, like publish it 2 weeks after the first week, just to have an extra week to kind of figure everything out. Because I feel like I'm like full-time mom all day long to 2 very small children that need me all the time. Also, side note, our youngest daughter was 8 weeks old when we started this, because we are morons and we're like, you know what, we got nothing better to do. Let's start a podcast.
Yeah, what do tired parents love to do? Start podcasts.
Yeah. That's like a pretty solid part-time jobs amount of time that I put into this every week. That maybe if we'd had like one extra week to just like figure everything out and not feel like I was like just like throwing something out there, but I also appreciate the mindset of you have to just hit record. You have to just get it out there, and it's not going to be great. It's going to get better.
Yeah.
But it was definitely a crazy week getting that all figured out. But we figured it out. We're here. We got it.
Yeah. Just slowly feeding the YouTube and podcast algorithm, and hopefully one day we catch on, but if not, we'll just keep drinking wine, watching movies that are in some way culturally significant.
There it is. And I also love that because we did not script the title of that. You just said that in the first episode, and that's what it is. Welcome to Culture Night, where each week we drink fancy wine and drink fancy wine and watch
movies
and watch movies that are in some way culturally significant.
Leave it to the pros.
That you still have to read it off your phone every week.
Someday I'll be confident enough.
Do not even. And then my last question is, what are you excited about for season 2?
Like I said, I'm just excited about having some more continuity in between these things and exploring some of the origins of a lot of the common tropes that we see, like today in movies of Westerns and whatnot.
Yeah. After even just this conversation of like possible themes we could have, I'm like really excited. But now I'm feeling stressed because where do we start? Which one do we pick? Where do we go from here? I don't know.
I think we're not gonna have any like consistent length on the seasons. It's something we're also going to figure out as we go. Like the second season might be like 3 episodes, and season 3 might be like 19. Like we'll figure out what works, what we need to do. So I'm excited to just pick one and just roll with it and see where that takes us.
And I'm also excited that we've found a format of how to do and edit the podcast and like get them out to people, and how to record them every week in a setting that has some continuity between episodes but allows some wiggle room. But I'm also excited that like it's not like we have to stick with what we've started with in season 1, and that we have that freedom to kind of tweak things a little bit and adjust things as we go, and to kind of see, I mean, it's already evolved so much in 15 weeks that I'm super excited to see where are we 15 more weeks from now, or however many seasons later.
Probably right here.
I hope we're still right here. I like being right here.
Yeah. I was thinking back of a podcast that I've listened to recently, and they used to have a segment that they called Beef of the Week, where they explored like a Twitter, like or online Twitter argument or something between people. And I realized that after like 5 or 6 episodes, they hadn't really mentioned it since. And they're on like, probably 30 plus episodes in now. And I'm like, if you had a segment and it's not really sticking, or you don't really like doing it, or it's like, it's okay to drop and change things. And I think that's nice to just kind of remind myself, is that it's okay to try things, and people probably aren't going to stop watching because they're like, oh, you dropped that one segment, or you added that one thing, or changed that one thing. Just do what feels right.
And this is all about us and us hanging out. And if we don't like it, we're not going to do it.
Yeah. But I hope that other people do like it, because we do have a lot of fun watching it. And we hope people find the things that we learn and that we find interesting as we do.
Yeah. And again, any feedback, please send it our way. Do you have any other questions or any things you wanted to ask?
I don't think so.
Did I do a good job with the Q&A?
Yeah.
Of coming up with questions?
I was afraid they were going to be a lot more stressful, and like
I was keeping it as a like recap, like let's reflect on what we've done, not put you on the hot seat.
Next time we'll do some truth or dab with the
how did the last dab end for you the last time? Oh, great, that's right. All right.
Dab.
If you are enjoying this podcast, if you could rate and review wherever you get your podcast, and make sure to hit follow or subscribe. We really appreciate anybody who listens or watches, especially watching on YouTube. Sit down and watch us talk about movies. Good on you. And if you want to see more behind the scenes info or about what we're watching or what we're doing or what we're learning, you can follow us on Instagram at Culture Night Pod, or on Twitter at Culture Night Pod. I'm trying really hard to keep up with all the social medias. It is kind of hard, but there are just the 3: YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter is a lot, but I'm doing my best to get it all out there. We are the only people running this, so do what we can. And tune in next week to see where season 2 takes us, and what we're watching, what we're doing, what we're thinking.
It'll be a surprise to us too,
because we'll probably decide right before the movie starts.
Yep.
All right, so cheers. End of season 1. Catch you in season 2.